Hello everyone, welcome to my React tutorial. This tutorial is a multi-part series where I'm going to be stepping through a project and hopefully you can pick up some React tips on the way. This video in particular is called React tutorial number 0 because we're not going to start with any coding. We are going to focus on introduction to React, some logistics, and setup for your development environment. Cool. So why React? If you've clicked on this video, you've probably heard the name React been used somewhere. So just to clarify, React is not a language. React is a JavaScript web framework. So JavaScript is the language, and React is essentially the attachment to JavaScript to make it able to do more things. Jumping into some key points about React, the first big one is that React is component-based. So this means that the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript is all condensed down to a singular React component. This component is very powerful because components can call other components, and this generally creates a very organized, very efficient code structure. A second point about React is that React has a state. So a state in itself is just a collection of values. And you might be thinking, well, hey, variables, right? Any variables, any object is a collection of values. But state is particularly important because it has built-in React listeners attached to it. So each time I modify the state, it will automatically call the render function and maybe some more if we specify. We'll get more into this later. Another key point about React is that it's very popular, and popular languages tend to have a lot of libraries attached to them. Libraries are super useful because it allows you to do many, many more things while still keeping your code clean. Yep, and another sub point attached to React is that if you're looking to apply these skills later, like if you really enjoy React, a lot of industry uses React or things similar to React. So if you really enjoy React, you can apply these skills later. So why this tutorial in particular? There are dozens, probably hundreds of React tutorials online. I'm going to try to make this tutorial a little bit more unique by stressing the things that I think are important. First thing is that I will try to prioritize utility over syntax. By utility, I mean implementation. So a lot of React tutorials I've looked at so far have mainly been focused on syntax, meaning here's some React code, what does this do? What does this do? What does this do? And I'm going to cover that too, but I won't stress it enough or nearly as much as the utility, meaning how do we actually create something? Like why are we doing XYZ on our React code? And moreover, I'm going to be stepping through a project, so if you ever see anything that you think will be useful later, you can always come back to this tutorial and essentially see my implementation. Secondly, I will try to prioritize concepts over syntax. So this is really asking the why question at each major point. Why are we doing it this way as opposed to another way? And this, I believe, is super important because it really makes your tutorial more of an education thing rather than a following thing. Cool. And finally, this tutorial will use a lot of integration. So React is very powerful by itself, but in my opinion, it's even more powerful as we integrate with more things. So the first is Material UI. This is a personal favorite. Material UI looks great with very little overhead. And secondly, my favorite backend connection would be Firebase. So Firebase in itself is a collection of tools. I'm going to be focusing on the real-time database, Firebase authentication, and Firebase hosting. We'll get more into that later. And finally, just some recommended setup. This is the setup I personally use. So in no way do you need to copy this, although I recommend this. And if you're following this line by line, it might be helpful to have this setup too. So I use iTerm2, which is a terminal shell. More about that is linked. VS Code, which is an IDE. This is my personal favorite. VS Code is really great for a bunch of reasons. I'll get more into that later. And finally, Homebrew. Homebrew is essentially like a must-do for any Mac user. Homebrew helps with installation. And before you move on to the next video, please have an IDE, a terminal, have Node installed because it'll make everything run smoother. See you guys in the next video.